Imagine being detained in the same facility that once held the world's most dangerous terrorists. Sounds extreme, right? Well, that's exactly what President Trump is planning for certain immigrants under his new crackdown. The Guantanamo Bay detention camp, infamous for its history, is now set to house what Trump calls the worst of the worst illegal immigrants. So what's really going on, and why is this move sparking outrage? Let's break it all down. To understand how we got here, we first need to talk about the law that set everything in motion, the Laken Riley Act. This isn't just another immigration bill. It's a direct response to a tragic event that shocked the nation, and it carries serious implications for how the U.S. deals with undocumented immigrants moving forward. The act is named after Laken Hope Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student from Georgia who was brutally murdered in February 2024. According to authorities, her attacker was an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela, who had crossed the border illegally and was already facing prior charges. Her death became a flashpoint in the immigration debate, with many arguing that lax border policies allowed a dangerous individual to enter and remain in the country. In the weeks following Riley's death, Republican lawmakers moved swiftly to draft legislation in her name. Their goal? To prevent undocumented immigrants with any record of criminal activity from remaining free in the U.S. The bill passed the House of Representatives with a majority of 251 to 170, gaining some support from moderate Democrats concerned about rising crime. The Senate followed suit, and once it reached President Trump's desk, he signed it into law almost immediately. So what does this act actually do? It tightens detention rules for undocumented immigrants accused of crimes, specifically targeting individuals involved in burglary, theft, assaulting law enforcement officers, and crimes that result in serious injury or death. Under this law, federal authorities are now required, by mandate, to detain these individuals until their cases are fully processed. In other words, no more bail, no more release pending trial, no more sanctuary loopholes. If someone is in the country illegally and is arrested for these offenses, they must remain in custody. Beyond that, the act also gives state attorneys general the power to sue the federal government if they believe immigration enforcement isn't being handled properly. This is a direct challenge to federal policies under past administrations, where local governments often had limited power to hold Washington accountable on immigration enforcement. Now, if a state believes that federal agencies are failing to detain and deport dangerous individuals, they can take legal action. Supporters of the bill argue that it's a necessary step to keep violent offenders off the streets and close dangerous loopholes in immigration law. They point to cases like Riley's as evidence that past policies have failed to protect American citizens. They also highlight statistics showing that over 46% of non-citizens in federal prison were convicted of violent offenses, including homicide, assault, and drug trafficking. A figure reported by the U.S. Sentencing Commission in its latest data. But critics say this law goes too far, arguing that it could lead to widespread mandatory detention of immigrants who haven't even been convicted of a crime yet. Some legal experts worry that it could overload the justice system, stretching detention facilities beyond capacity and increasing costs for taxpayers. Others argue that many immigrants are arrested on minor offenses or are victims of racial profiling, and keeping them in detention indefinitely violates due process. Despite the controversy, the Laken Riley Act is now law. And Trump isn't stopping there. He's taking it a step further, by declaring that the worst of these offenders won't just be detained. They'll be sent to Guantanamo Bay. And that's where things take an even more dramatic turn. Standing before reporters, Trump made an announcement that no other U.S. president had ever dared to propose. We're not just going to detain these criminals, we're going to send the worst of the worst to Guantanamo Bay. Yes, Guantanamo Bay, the same facility that once housed Al-Qaeda operatives, 9/11 conspirators, and ISIS terrorists. Guantanamo Bay, situated on Cuba's southeastern coast, was taken by U.S. forces and their Cuban allies in 1898 as part of efforts to free the island from Spanish control. In 1903, the United States formally established a naval base there, after leasing 45 square miles of land and water from the newly independent Cuban government. The base remains the U.S.'s oldest overseas military installation, and the only one in a communist nation. In 1934, a treaty between the United States and Cuba reaffirmed the lease, making it permanent unless both governments agree to terminate it, or the U.S. abandons the base. In 2002, following the 9/11 attacks and the onset of the U.S. war in Afghanistan, President George W. Bush established a military prison at Guantanamo Bay to house suspects linked to terrorism. For decades, the facility, known as Gitmo, has been a source of intense controversy, primarily due to allegations of torture, which the Bush administration broadly denied, although a senior official did admit to some practices. In 2005, Amnesty International referred to the facility as the gulag of our times. Although Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden pledged to close the facility, Guantanamo remains operational, with 15 detainees still held there, as of a recent Reuters report. Now, under Trump's plan, it could soon be home to undocumented immigrants who commit serious crimes in the U.S. It will surpass the capacity of current U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) facilities, with the largest of these holding around 2,000 beds. In total, ICE has the ability to detain approximately 40,000 individuals. But it's not for the first time. U.S. government agencies and contractors have used Guantanamo Bay for decades to detain asylum seekers and refugees. In 1994, President Bill Clinton resumed the base's use for processing Haitian refugees and ordered Cuban asylum seekers caught at sea to be held there. That year, the facility housed 45,000 migrants. The International Refugee Assistance Project, IRAP, accused the U.S.-run Migrant Operations Center, GMOC, of detaining migrants fleeing Haiti, Cuba, and other Caribbean countries in prison-like conditions, often without transparency or access to the outside world. Many are held until a third country agrees to resettle them, a process that can take years. IRAP also reported health and human rights violations, including poor living conditions, abusive guards, and forced medical procedures. On the surface, this decision might seem extreme, but if you dig deeper, there's a strategic reason behind it. Guantanamo Bay, or Gitmo, is legally different from detention centers on U.S. soil. It exists in a legal gray zone outside the U.S. mainland, which means that many of the legal protections immigrants would normally have, like quick access to courts or asylum requests, may not apply in the same way. Currently, the migrant detention facility at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base is very small, but Trump's plan is far more ambitious. According to classified documents leaked to reporters, the administration is preparing to expand Guantanamo's detention capacity to hold up to 30,000 detainees. The plan comes as part of Trump's larger immigration strategy, which includes mass deportations of undocumented immigrants, stricter border policies, including reviving the Remain in Mexico program, expanding immigration and customs enforcement, ICE operations across all 50 states. Under this plan, undocumented immigrants who are convicted of serious crimes, such as burglary, drug trafficking, and violent assaults, will not be held in traditional ICE detention centers. Instead, they'll be classified as high-risk criminal aliens and sent to Guantanamo Bay for indefinite detention. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has already confirmed that it is reviewing plans to transfer certain detainees to the naval base. Immigration officials have been ordered to identify at least 10,000 individuals currently in U.S. detention facilities who meet the criteria for Guantanamo transfer. To make this happen, Trump has reportedly ordered $1.2 billion in emergency funding to expand the facilities at Guantanamo. Construction crews are expected to begin working on new detention units within the next few months. A DHS official, speaking anonymously, told reporters, "The goal is to send a clear message. If you come to the U.S. illegally and commit a serious crime, you won't just be deported, you'll be detained offshore, with no easy way out." Unsurprisingly, Trump's Guantanamo plan has ignited a firestorm of controversy. Supporters argue that this is exactly what America needs, a strong deterrent against criminals entering the country illegally. Conservative lawmakers have praised Trump's decision, calling it a bold move to protect American citizens. Some have even suggested that Guantanamo could become a permanent holding facility for violent, undocumented criminals. One of Trump's key allies in Congress, Senator Tom Cotton, said, "We already use Guantanamo for the world's worst terrorists. Why not use it for violent illegal immigrants who have no business being in the U.S. in the first place?" But the backlash has been just as intense. Human rights organizations have condemned the plan, warning that Guantanamo has a dark history of human rights abuses, including reports of torture and inhumane conditions. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, released a statement calling the move a disgraceful violation of international law. Even Cuba's government has weighed in. President Miguel Diaz-Canel denounced the plan as an act of brutality, accusing the U.S. of turning Guantanamo into a prison island for unwanted migrants. The United Nations has warned that detaining migrants in an offshore facility without clear legal protections could put the U.S. in violation of international refugee laws. Meanwhile, Mexico and several Latin American nations, already at odds with Washington over Trump's hardline immigration stance, are considering diplomatic responses that could further strain relations. Even close allies in Europe have voiced concerns, with some comparing the plan to policies seen in authoritarian regimes rather than democratic nations. Legally, this move places the U.S. in uncharted waters. Guantanamo Bay has always been a legal anomaly, a place where detainees are held under different rules than those on U.S. soil. By sending immigrants there, the government is effectively sidestepping the legal rights they would otherwise have in traditional immigration detention centers. This raises serious concerns about due process, as legal scholars have warned that prolonged detentions without clear legal pathways could result in constitutional challenges. Some legal experts within Trump's own party have privately expressed concerns that this could open up a flood of lawsuits against the federal government. While some analysts worry that this could lead to a new era of indefinite detention, others point to the staggering costs. They argue that the U.S. immigration system is already under immense financial pressure, with a backlog of asylum cases, overburdened courts, and an overwhelmed border patrol. Redirecting resources toward offshore detention instead of improving border security and legal processing could create more problems than it solves. Guantanamo is one of the most expensive prisons in the world, with each detainee costing U.S. taxpayers over $13 million per year. Expanding it to house tens of thousands of immigrants could cost billions annually. Even some fiscal conservatives who support stricter immigration policies are questioning whether this is the most cost-effective solution. Right now, the Trump administration is moving forward with this plan, despite the backlash. Some Democrats in Congress are pushing for legal challenges, but Trump's executive powers on immigration are broad, meaning that he may not need congressional approval to proceed. The first group of detainees is expected to be transferred to Guantanamo by mid-2025. The administration has hinted that this could just be the beginning, with further expansions possible if illegal immigration and crime rates don't decline. So the question is, will this extreme measure actually work? Will sending undocumented criminals to Guantanamo deter illegal immigration and reduce crime? Or will it become one of the most controversial human rights disasters in modern U.S. history? One thing is certain. This decision has thrown America's immigration debate into uncharted territory.